Welcome, fellow brave believers. I'm Sean, and this is Kingdom in Context. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. We're going to have a fun roundtable discussion on the topic of, did the Son of God, Yeshua of Nazareth, did he pre-exist before being born of a woman on the earth? I think it's going to be fun, and we have some wonderful guests to join us. Without further ado, we can just bring them on in. All right, this is our brother John Lawson from the self-titled channel, John Lawson. He does some wonderful animated videos. Thanks for coming on, John.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, brother. We also have Matthew Jansen from Ministers of the New Covenant. Welcome, brother. Oh, I'm going to take you off mute here.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, brother. I'm excited.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And then also without needed introduction on my channel, WesBlazeMuziK, co-host of Uncommon Ground, from the self-titled channel, WesBlazeMuziK. This is our brother, WesBlaze. Welcome.
Shalom, family. Good to see y'all. Happy to be here.
And I see you're sitting in front of the 7 domes.
Under the
giving
7
your
domes.
shalom.
That's right. Yes, sir.
That's great. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. We wanted to, we've heard this idea, and I watched a video about, I think it's commonly ascribed to Unitarian belief that the Son of God did not pre-exist before being born on the earth. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I guess you would say if you guys are all in agreement with us that Yeshua is not the Most High Creator and that he is the Messiah, though, we would all be considered Unitarian. But what divides us, I guess, it's a poor lack of a better term, but what divides us would be those who believe he pre-existed versus those who believe he did not pre-exist in a literal conscious way.
And the Trinitarians would just call you heretic, right? Is that?
Oh yeah, I've been a heretic for years.
We're used to that as well.
Just call you anathema.
Yeah.
But you know, one thing or a few things we agree on, like all 4 of us would believe that Yeshua is the Son of Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite lines I heard from Brother Sean, I was watching a debate one time, and the guy said, well, before we start, I don't think I quite understand who you believe Yeshua is. And Brother Sean just very simply said, well, I believe he's the Son of Yahweh. And he just left it at that. And I was like, bravo, that's good, my brother. So we can agree on that. And we agree that Yeshua is the sent Savior and the high priest in the heavenly tabernacle. I think, and I've watched a few of Brother Sean's teachings on this in the past, I think we agree that Yeshua was not the angel of Yahweh in the Old Testament too.
Yeah,
is that correct?
My understanding is that it would not be Yeshua. That would be either mostly Michael or even Yahweh. But I'm thinking mostly Michael.
Yeah. See, I was ignorant to that, and I was like, man, if they go down that route, that'll take a whole hour itself. So that makes things a little easier.
Yeah. And then we all agree on the Torah, the law of Yahweh, the instructions of Yahweh. So there's a lot more that we agree on than we disagree on, which I'm so thankful for that. So
absolutely. And this is for everyone that's watched my channel that's seen any of the other roundtable discussions. You probably have picked out a few places in all of the roundtable discussions where some of the guests don't agree with each other or with me or whatever. And so that's fine. We love diversity in thought and understanding. Obviously the core concepts, all 4 of us tonight, we agree. Yes. And there's like Yeshua says, there's one true God, and then he sent his son to be our Messiah and high priest. And so I love little things that are glazed over because of church tradition. Kind of like in Revelation 2, 25 through 27, Yeshua talks about, if you overcome, I'll give you the right to sit on the throne with me, just like I overcame and sat on the throne with my Father. And then in Revelation 21, 26 or 22, the Father, the Almighty, and the Son are the temple, right? They are the Holy of Holies. They are in the New Jerusalem.
Yes.
This is something that I think a lot of people forget, is that, it's when we go to the New Jerusalem, which is our inheritance, the inheritance of the saints, Isaiah 54:17, after the resurrection, and we walk into that wonderful heavenly country that Abraham longed for, we're going to be able to see the Father and the Son.
Amen.
So that's a beautiful thought. A lot of people kind of, I know that we've already mentioned this word Unitarian, and then we made a joke about Trinitarian theology, which is the dominant held theology, just through church tradition. But that's, from the last 300-400 years. Before that, in Europe, it was dominantly held through enforcement, but we won't get into some of the uglier points of history. But basically, the Trinitarian thought process, it actually, kind of muddies the waters, if I could put it like that. And you guys are welcome to kind of, add on to some of this loose descriptive language, but it kind of muddies the waters and really takes a lot of the focus off the Father, because it seems to make Jesus everything,
Man.
and that's just not what we feel. The Bible clearly describes a specific role for the Son, And so tonight, even though we have all this wonderful things in agreement, I think what we don't agree on is when the Son actually existed. Right. So you guys have seen me debate Trinitarians, even though tonight's not a debate, it's a discussion. You guys see me actually do a back and forth style heated discussion, not on my end, but heated towards me discussion when Trinitarians who do not like the fact that I'm not willing to go along with the mantra language of the eternal Son. And I think that's what you were referring to earlier, Matthew, when you said you heard me answer that question and just say he's the Son of Yahweh. Like, instead of saying he's the eternal Son, which is what they want you to say. And so they get very upset with that idea, and so that would be just as a general blanket for everyone watching who may not understand, why are we talking about this? If it's such a point, it's not a point of contention, because none of us are contentious with each other about this topic. It's just simply, we wanted to get together and say, you know what, this may be really edifying for the viewers. Dig in your Bibles, look at these verses we'll be referencing tonight and the perspectives brought towards them. And we think everyone will have a good time. So WesBlaze, anything you want to say before? I'd like to turn the floor over to John and Matthew for a few minutes to kind of expound upon what they feel they believe. But before we do, is there anything you want to say?
Maybe just kind of open it up to say that from my understanding of Scripture and studying alongside with Sean, that we would hold that Yeshua is the firstborn of all creation, right? That he was the beginning of the creation of God, and that he did in fact exist before the sun and moon and stars and the earth were created, as Enoch would tell us, and a number of other passages according to my understanding and interpretation. But I'm very interested to understand how y'all have reached the conclusions you've reached, and I'd love to speak about it with you guys.
Yeah, there's another thing we agree on. So we don't believe that Yeshua is eternal past. That's what I gathered from you two brothers. We do believe Yeshua is eternal future. I think y'all would agree with that, but not eternal past. So that's another thing we can agree on. Hallelujah.
Yeah, I know that when you hear me talking in some of the interviews and debates with the Trinitarians, well, they'll say, well, so are you saying that Jesus was created? And they just keep going back to that concept of, are you claiming he was created? And I'm like, now slow your roll for a minute. I'm just saying the scriptures don't tell us when, like in my understanding, they do tell us that he was with the Father before the world was created. Right, but before that, it doesn't say when or if Yeshua eternally existed or came forth the Father. To me, in my understanding, it does say at some point he came forth from the Father. And that's probably the best language I can use, because that's what I see scriptures say.
Begotten.
He was, well, it's so funny how that Greek word means uniquely created, you know what I mean? And so what does that look like without a woman there, without the trappings of mankind, with a male and a female and a womb of a woman to birth a baby? What does it look like where the Father, before all the things that we understand as reality, before everything existed, how did the Father bring forth his Son? And so, that I don't know, because the Bible doesn't tell me. So that I just, I'm done right there in my thought process. Whereas the Trinitarian mindset will say you can't be done right there, because that makes him created. And they don't like that. They want him eternally being existent with the Father and co-equal to the Father, which is wholly unscriptural. But and so they say, if you don't think that they're co-eternal and co-equal, then you're out of the faith. It's such a weird point of division to argue about, because it literally is not stated in Scripture as a qualifier for the faith.
Right.
What say you, brothers?
Oh, I agree. I agree. Firstborn, Colossians 1:15, I think, is where Brother Wes was going with. Firstborn of every creature. I've told people, like, if I say, this is the firstborn of my sheep, that means the firstborn belongs to the category of the sheep. So if I raise a flock of sheep. So if I say firstborn of every creature, then that means Yeshua is in the category of a creature. He's separate from Yahweh. Yahweh is eternal, immortal, invisible, the only wise El, Paul wrote to Timothy. and Yeshua is the firstborn of every creature. Some newer translations actually gloss over that, and they translate it firstborn over every creature, and that's not correct actually from the Greek there. So
When I study the word firstborn, we see that Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, or Ishmael and Isaac. And the second son, it says in Hebrews, is his firstborn, because it's the firstborn from the promise of the heir to the coming Messiah. So the firstborn can obviously be to be first born, or it could be in rank and importance.
Sure.
Isaac was and is by promise more important than Ishmael, even though he came second, because he was the promised son to Abraham, even though he was not technically firstborn. And so Yeshua, from our perspective, born in the first century, long after thousands of humans were born, is the firstborn by rank and importance and honor. And so he's the firstborn of all creation in status and rank, but not in time like in Genesis.
Yeah, we see that word firstborn used in a variety of contexts
Yeah.
in my experience. I'm pretty sure, I think it's Jeremiah 32 or 31. It talks about Ephraim is the firstborn. And this is Yahweh speaking through the prophet Jeremiah, saying that Ephraim is my firstborn. We also see that language in Exodus chapter 4 with Yahweh speaking to Moses, talking about Israel as my firstborn. Now, if anyone that has read their Bible understands that Israel is different from Ephraim. And so this is, we have two different characters being mentioned. Even though Ephraim is sometimes lumped in with the tribe of Joseph in references, especially in the middle books of the Bible. But ultimately, very few times do you see an overall reference for all of Israelites being referred to as Ephraim, because that was a part of the northern house. But before the northern and the southern house was a thing, during the days of Rehoboam and Jeroboam, back in the days of Moses, when it was all just the tribe of Israel, even the entirety of the tribe of Israel is referred to as a firstborn in Yahweh's language. So I think it's interesting that, yes, I would concede that kind of language can be used in different contexts.
Just to piggyback off what you're saying too, I never thought of it till you just said it, that Israel's called the firstborn, and we know they're not the first people to be born, right? Adam and Eve were.
Yeah, and so to me, and you guys can help me understand if you have a different understanding, but to me, the context of that mentioning is the fact that he wanted them to be a set apart nation, who would become a nation of priests and kings, therefore qualifying them. That was what the firstborn of a family was supposed to be. It would get passed down from the patriarch of the family, both the priesthood and the leadership of the family, the birthright and the eldership, as we see Jacob gets that instead of Esau through a series of circumstances. But ultimately, in the context of Colossians 1:15, as well as I think it's Revelation 3:14, I don't know if that's the context. It seems to say that the context is more than just some sort of family passing on of authority. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, so I would agree with John that firstborn, and you, Sean, that firstborn can mean in rank. I think the Colossians 1 text is talking about Yeshua being the firstborn in rank and in time. I just think that the creation mentioned in Colossians 1 isn't the Genesis creation, but is the new creation. He's the firstborn from the dead. Colossians 1, I think verse 18 or 19 says. So he's the first man to inherit immortality, that everlasting life in that way. And what's created in Colossians 1 isn't birds, trees, land, etc., but thrones, dominions, principalities, or powers. Paul uses this kind of verbiage in his epistle to the Ephesians, where he says that he makes out of Jew and Gentile one new man. That's new creation. And then Yeshua, when he ascends into heaven, Yeshua gives gifts, and the gifts he gives are apostles, prophets, evangelists, and pastoring teachers. These are all part of the thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers that were created through or by Yeshua. Yahweh first, but through or by Yeshua. So I do think it's rank and order in Colossians 1.
Is this the passage you're referring to here?
Yes.
15 through 16. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that all things being created is referencing church
New
hierarchy?
creation. Yeah, the new creation. So if you'll notice, it says visible or invisible, and then it tells you what is talking about, whether thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities, all things were created through him and for him. So this isn't Genesis 1 and 2 language with the creation of the earth and the trees and the animals and human beings, but it's a reference to the new creation, which he is the head of in rank and also the head of in order. As it calls him the firstborn from the dead. I think it's in verse 18 or
Yeah,
19.
I was going to say 17 and 18 also is
Mhm.
a great,
Yeah, it
assistance
definitely in
understanding
18
that.
it says the word church. He's the head of the body of the church, beginning and firstborn from among the dead. That's about the resurrection.
Mhm.
But you guys don't think this passage here is referring to things that would be outside of the scope of the authority structure of the church or the new creation?
No, I mean, he's the head of the assembly, but he's also in charge of angels, which is what the whole context of
Hebrews.
Colossians was about, is that they were beginning to worship angels, thinking that Yeshua was below the angels in some way. Not to oversimplify the book, but the author of Colossians had to set the tone, like he is above us and the angels in heaven, so he's over all things at the right hand of the Most High. And so, yeah, he has to include both heaven and earth when it comes to his status and authority as the head of the assembly, head of the angels, head of everything.
Okay,
It's
so
about establishing his rank and not when was he born.
and how would you guys interpret this part of the passage here that I have highlighted? For in him all things were created.
Go
I think
for it,
it's
Matthew.
talking about the new creation. So I don't think it's talking about the Genesis creation. So
Okay.
all things were created in him, and the context is the new creation. One new man, Jew and Gentile, the gifts that Yeshua gave from heaven, that he is the firstborn from the dead. He's the first man, the first fruits of those that have fallen asleep. A lot of times Bible readers, or Christians, I should say, nominal Christians, don't understand Yahweh is in the process of a new creation.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that's how I understand that text. Now, we really haven't laid out why would we interpret a text like this
Let's
this
step back
way.
then. Let's step back then. You guys,
Yeah.
I'll share away. I'll be quiet.
Yeah. So and Brother John, you step in. I think Brother John and I are pretty much in full agreements on this subject. But so we believe that based upon previous revelation in the Older Testament, the Tanakh, that the promised Redeemer or the Messiah was to be a human Israelite from the lineage of David through the tribe of Judah. I think that's what everybody was anticipating based upon the Hebrew Bible. Texts like Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman that would bruise the head of the serpent. Genesis 49, 8 through 10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, or a lawgiver from between his feet till Shiloh come. Deuteronomy 18, Yahweh says a prophet like Moshe, he'll raise up from among the brethren, not literally like coming down from heaven literally, but he'll be from among the brethren. 2 Samuel 7, a prophecy, I think about the Messiah because Hebrews 1 quotes it, where Yahweh says, I will be to him a father. He will be to me a son. Not I already am his father and he already is my son. And then there's a lot of text in the Psalms that link the Messiah up with the lineage of King David. So even before we get into the Gospels, which I'd like to get into Matthew and Luke as time progresses and allows, we see the promise that the Redeemer and the Savior and the Messiah would be a human being. He'd be a son of man, Daniel 7, and he would definitely be an Israelite, and specifically from David through the line of Judah. I'm pretty sure Brother John concurs with that.
Yeah, and if I'm a bit repetitive with what Matthew's saying, it's just because I've written it down. I want to make sure I cover all the points that I wanted to sort of start this conversation off with. But the first one is obvious, but I just thought, let's start with the obvious. I believe Yeshua is 100% man, 100% human. And as we see, human beings don't pre-exist. They exist once they're born as flesh and bone. You guys don't believe he was an angel, but that was my second point. It was that whatever he was before a man, that is what he is. He just took on a human flesh, but he's not a true human if he is XYZ prior to becoming flesh and bone. So he's something else that took on flesh and bone, but he's not a true human, because true humans don't, lack for a better term, incarnate, from one thing to another. We just always have been human, and we begin our existence through, taking our first breath of air with our lungs, and not through any sort of pre-existent spiritual, the third point I want to bring in is in Hebrews 1, it says that in these last days, he spoke to us through his son. So if Yeshua was in the beginning in Genesis, I always like to ask, where is he speaking to us? Where do you see Yeshua speaking to us in the Old Testament? A lot of times people say, well, he didn't speak to us yet. And I said, okay, I respect that. But usually people say, well, he's right here. He's right there. He's the one visiting Abraham, or he's, XYZ. And I got to say, well, then that, in my opinion, I'm open to being wrong, but in my opinion, it contradicts Hebrews 1. It says in
John,
prior times with our fathers.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt you, brother, but you have the light of immortality is shining upon you right now. So
yeah, I turned it down. My lamp was getting emotional. Like sorry about that.
Okay.
So, anyways,
we can see again now.
Just to backtrack a little, but Hebrews says that in the former times he spoke to us through the prophets, but in these last days spoke to us through his son. To me, that says he never spoke to us prior in any way with a pre-existent person known as the son. Point 4, and again, don't worry. I don't have 100 points, but I'm sorry.
Well, just for the sake of some interaction, some of these points
Sure.
You're repeating from discussions you've had with other people, not things you've heard Wes and I talk about.
Well, I'm more so understanding what the point of view is from a pre-existent point of view, like an Aryan point of view. So, like, for example, I guess we can get into it, but do you guys think that Yeshua was active or engaging with Israel or anyone in the Old Testament verbally, like speaking to him or whatnot?
I think there's a passage in Isaiah that's prophetic of the Messiah that says he was concealed, like hidden in his quiver, in the Father's quiver, and then as well as in Enoch a couple times it says that he was concealed in the presence of the Most High and hidden.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Isaiah 42, Wes, and then it's also Enoch 48, but it's Isaiah 42. Now, just for the sake of clarity, John and Matthew, I just also so the audience understands, in case you guys make any comments throughout some of the verses we might pull from. Am I right to have I heard from you both? Am I correct that you do not view Enoch as scripture?
I don't. No. I believe it's pseudepigrapha.
Okay.
I haven't finished my study on that to speak. I can't, so I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak on First Enoch. I have listened to you guys talk about First Enoch, about the concealment, like Brother Wes just mentioned, the concealment of the Messiah. And I guess I could study more about that in regards to Isaiah and First Enoch. But I do believe in what sometimes the scholarly community calls ideal or notional preexistence. So I do believe that Yeshua, in a manner of speaking, existed in the mind and plan of God, similar to how the author of Hebrews says that Levi paid tithes to Melchizedek, being in the loins of his father Abraham. So I have no problem with that. I just don't think that Yeshua was a conscious being, spirit being, before he became a human being. I don't believe in the doctrine of the incarnation. I just think Yeshua was conceived or begotten.
Exactly. We believe in what's known as an idealistic preexistence. So we're in the mind and the plan of Yahweh, known as the Logos in John 1:1. He had that plan of salvation and a coming son through the lineage of Judah from the beginning. It wasn't plan B or C. It was always the first plan. And so in that sense, I could see how he's hidden in the quiver, but not as a conscious being.
Okay, so you guys said this verse here is the one you're referencing, that he was, this is just reference. Did I get that right? Sorry, I'm trying to multitask. I'm going to share.
You're good. No, that is one verse that I was referencing, John 1:1 or 1-3, where in the beginning was the Word. We have to study the word, which is the Greek word logos, Logos. And it's a pretty dense, heavy topic, but you kind of have to put your feet in some Greek sandals to understand how are they using this word in the first century. But to oversimplify it, and for the sake of time,
Well, we
we
don't.
can just
No,
say,
wait. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We not on this channel. We don't have to oversimplify it here. You're talking to.
you know what?
You don't have to oversimplify with us, brother.
Oh yeah, no, I just like to keep it simple.
I hear you, but if you're saying that this is a hinge point verse for you, and it all hinges on the definition or your study of the definition of the word, we're glad to hear you out. Because
Yeah,
I would, my first thought would be, how is the word was God if it's just simply the mind, the will, the intention, the first plan?
Right. So yeah, that's how I read it. It's, in the beginning was the plan, purpose, and desire of salvation. Was God and is God, or is Yahweh.
Okay, so is that, what kind of definition of the word God are you using in that context then?
When I say God, I mean the Father.
Okay, so the mind, plan, and intention was God?
Yeah, the part of what makes you a person. And again, this is what I was trying to get at, is that you got to think like a Greek. There is the physical part of you, where I can give you a hug or a high five, but then there's a part of you that's non-tangible. Your mind, your desires, your plan, your speech. If you wrote me a letter and I received it, my wife said, "Who is it?" I'd be like, "Oh, it's Sean." Well, this is your logos. The letter on the paper isn't literally you, but it's the logos of Sean. And so also the word or the Bible is the logos of the Father. And so his plans and purpose and desire is his logos. And so his plan was to send someone to die for our sins and resurrect and become our Savior, High Priest, and King. And that became flesh.
So in that interpretation, to say that this Greek word logos, that the text says was Elohim, so then you're saying that
Theos.
The theos, yeah, sorry, the Greek theos. So the logos to theos is, you're saying that it's not talking about an actual person. So I guess what I'm getting at is, do we see any other precedent in the New Testament use of the word theos where God is made metaphor of an idea or an intention?
I don't think it's like, God is this idea, but more so that part of God is his ideas or his plan. And so like when we see in Genesis, God spoke things into existence. That was his logos. And
Okay.
a lot of times, when God spoke to Israel or the people on earth, they heard his voice or his logos, but they didn't actually see him. And so that's part of him, but that's not the only part of him.
So Yeshua is that plan.
Exactly.
Okay. Because when it says in the next sentence, he, using a singular personal pronoun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Masculine pronoun, he was in the beginning with the Father. But
Right.
then it's the very next verse that I'm very curious, and I think y'all have already addressed part of that with Colossians 1 when we were talking about it. But all things came into being through him. And
Yeah, I take that as Genesis language, where the word of Yahweh, his speech, he spoke things into existence, and everything that he created was through his logos. It's very similar to how you guys think, probably, because you're thinking that Yeshua is the firstborn of creation, and through Yeshua as a conscious being, he created all things. The only difference is we think it's an idealistic preexistence of this non-person logos, and you guys are probably thinking it as kind of like the photo in that slideshow is pretty good, where Yeshua is sitting right there, being used as like a tool or a mouthpiece to create things, right?
So can I interject?
Yeah,
Is that
sorry,
okay?
Matthew. I was like looking at you to see if you want me to tag you in or not.
No, I don't want to interrupt. So there's in John 1:1, we start out with the Logos, and then obviously we get down to like the climax in John 1:14, the Word became flesh. I would say that Yeshua is what the Word of Yahweh became. He is the culmination of Yahweh's word and wisdom. So Logos, the precedent for Logos is in the Septuagint. It's used over 1,000 times. It never refers to a person. It's always a thought or a word or a plan. And it's very important that we recognize there's a difference between the God in John 1:1b, and the Word was with God, and the God in John 1:1c, and the Word was God. In John 1:1b, when it says the Word was with God, the Greek there is ton theon. It's a proper noun. The word theon is used with the article signifying the Almighty or Yahweh. In the John 1:1c, the last part, in the Word was God, it's just the word theos, and it's it's qualitative in Greek grammar. It's used as an adjective. It's not used as a noun anymore. And this is why somebody like James Moffat, his translation would translate it, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was divine. And then there's about 8 English translations of the New Testament prior to the King James Version that would go on to say something like this, like the Geneva, Matthew's, Bishop's Bible, the Great Bible. The same was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through it, and apart from it, nothing came into being that has come into being. The it being neuter, referring back to the Logos, the plan or the word of Almighty Yahweh. Psalm 33, by the word of Yahweh were the heavens made, and all the host by the breath of his mouth. Genesis 1, and God said, let there be light. So God is creating through his word. And then eventually he speaks his son into existence in the womb of the Virgin Miriam. So the word becomes flesh, or the word becomes a human being and tabernacles among us. Kind of like house plans that exist in the mind of a designer. You know, you got this great architect, he comes up with these plans, they're in his mind, he writes them out. Eventually the house comes to fruition. You look at the house and you can tell how intelligent the architect is by how great the house is built. But the house is not one-to-one equated with the architect. The plans became a house, or the plans became flesh. This is kind of how I see John 1. And I do think this text is talking about the Genesis creation.
Oh, you're muted, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, and okay, and
Your logos was cut off.
Yeah, WesBlaze, I think I've heard that interpretation before. Do you have any thoughts to add to that? That's your questions you have for that? Because I'm going to go to a scripture here in a minute.
Well, so from my understanding, their interpretation, like things with like the firstborn, I agree that it can mean preeminence and authority. But they're saying that it can't mean that he existed chronologically before everything else. I would hold that it's both. Whereas they're saying that that he existed as a plan, but not physically, literally. I would hold both. That there was a plan for him, but that he also physically existed as the firstborn. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. I'm not sure how to rebuttal a couple of the things they've said, so it's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, if I could real quick, I just want to ask both you brothers, John and Matthew, about this passage here. So in Luke chapter 1, how do you guys interpret? Oh, sorry. Did it go to Luke chapter 1? It did. Okay, so how do you guys interpret this here? Where the angel's talking to John and Mary, and the Holy Spirit will come upon you. The power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God.
Yes.
What's the purpose for this whole event with the Holy Spirit overshadowing the mysterious pregnancy of Mary to the whole, Matthew chapter 1, Joseph wants to put her away quietly until an angel has to tell him what's up. So he doesn't do that. What's to be understood if it's not a, godly incarnation through a virgin, then what do we make of this?
So it's absolutely a virgin conception and virgin birth in Matthew 1 and Luke 1. I think that's undeniable from the text. But the uniqueness here is that Mary has been chosen to give birth to the promised Hebrew Messiah, the Redeemer that was to come from the Davidic line. If you look just a few verses before this, in verse 31, behold, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, Hebrew Yeshua. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. So he's not the Most High. We agree on that. Then notice it says the Lord God will give him the throne of his father, David. The word father there is used in the sense of ancestor. So Yeshua is a descendant of David. Descendants are not older than their ancestors. He will reign over the house of Judah forever. His kingdom, or Jacob forever, his kingdom will never end. So this was the Davidic Messiah. This was the promised Messiah in the Hebrew Bible, but yet it was a supernatural birth. So he wasn't just any mere man. We could liken it. I know it's not one-to-one equal, but we could liken it to the first man, Adam, who didn't have a father or a mother, but Yahweh made him from the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. He was very unique. And in Luke's genealogy in chapter 3, Adam is called the Son of God. because he was created by God in a special way,
Sure.
and God has a unique relationship with him. So I don't think this is incarnation theology in Luke 1. I actually think this is conception or begotten
Okay.
theology,
So I appreciate it. I wanted to clarify because so you guys are basically, when you say incarnation theology, I just want to make sure that the audience follows the terms we're using, right?
Okay.
When you say incarnation theology, you're referring more to maybe a hypostatic union concept like Trinitarians teach. Is that what you're thinking?
That would definitely fall under what I'm
Okay.
talking about. But incarnation meaning that a spirit being, whether it be Yahweh, which you guys don't think Yahweh came down and wrapped himself in a robe of flesh. I know that. But a spirit being in general, whether it be angelic or like Yeshua, like you said, there was a time he came forth from the Father, and then there was an incarnation where he became a man. I would argue that our Messiah has to be a man. And if he wasn't a man first, if he was something else first, then that first thing he was is what he is. He's really not a man. He turned into a man, but he is whatever he was at the beginning. I think that Hebrew
No.
scripture.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, would it be fair to say that that is your interpretation, though, to say that process? Yeah, because you're saying basically, if the process is as many people think, that he was a spiritual being and then was made into a man, you're saying under the way you would view it personally, you don't think he's actually a man. But
Right.
is it fair to say that is your interpretation?
Sure.
As opposed to like God saying, I can take you out of being a spirit being
Sure.
and make you into the flesh of a
Yeah.
man, as an actual DNA of a man.
Sure.
Because the big question becomes, what is he now?
Well, he's divine now. He's taken upon himself the divine nature.
But
So
what does that mean, though?
that
If
means
I
that,
may ask.
yeah, upon the resurrection of the dead,
Uh-huh.
he inherited immortality. So he's become Elohim. This is why all of the Newer Testament texts that refer to Yeshua as God are post-resurrection texts. So like Hebrews 1:8 or John 20:28, or Colossians 2:9, in him dwells the fullness of the Godhead bodily. These are post-resurrection texts about Yeshua, that after he humbled himself, even though he had this wonderful beginning in the womb of his mother, he humbled himself. He washed people's feet, even the feet of the one that was going to betray him. Therefore, God highly exalted him and gave him the name above every name and seated him at his right hand. That's post-resurrection. So the first was the earthly, and then the second was the celestial or the heavenly. I definitely believe Yeshua's divinity now that he's resurrected. So.
One of the things that I want to bring up is that if Yeshua pre-existed, then correct me if I'm wrong if you see it this way, but he pre-existed as an immortal being, and then he became a mortal being, and then when he resurrected, he went back to being immortal. And I think that actually goes against the basic terms of what immortals are. So if you can be, or you are immortal, you don't go and become mortal. It contradicts what immortals are. And so
we definitely can get there for sure. I think, I'm not a Trinitarian, but I know that, Philippians 2:7 sure does work well to address that concept. Same thing with 1 Timothy 3:16. And I think I've actually heard rebuttal from a Unitarian stance to 1 Timothy 3:16. But what do you guys think about this particular passage? If we're talking about that transitionary point, right, where was he an actual spiritual Elohim style being before becoming born through womb of a woman on earth? What say you about this verse? Hebrews 1:6 says, when he again brings the firstborn into the world. So I know you guys have already tried to address the language of the firstborn. We talked about that already, right? So I think I know your stance there. In the Septuagint, in Psalm 110, verse 3, it says, with you the power in the days of your might, in the splendor of the holy ones, from the womb, before the morning star, I begot you.
Yeah, that's a good one there, Brother Sean, in Psalm 110. As much as I've read the Septuagint, that's the first time I've ever had anybody bring that text up to me. So that's a good point, Psalm 110. I'm familiar with the Hebrews 1 text, and I would use firstborn, prototokos in the Greek there, as meaning preeminent. And I think bringing him into the world refers to out of the womb of the Virgin Miriam and into the world. There's text in John that talks about how that people that are born from the womb are men that cometh into the world. The Psalm 110 text I can't speak to because I haven't researched that.
Well, I'm thinking to myself, what is the morning star when you read it, Sean and Wes Blaze?
My thoughts were, the first thing I pair it with was in First Enoch, as I mentioned earlier in 48, where it says that before the Son was created, he was named in the existence and existed in the presence of the Father.
So
Yeah,
the
so
morning
here-
star is Yeshua.
No, I would say the morning star being the sun, maybe in that understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Yeshua, right?
Well-
Pre-existent Yeshua.
Yeshua
Yeah.
being created before the sun was created.
Yes,
Oh, you mean
before-
S-U-N, son?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I kept thinking like, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Who's on first? No, we got it.
I know.
Yeah,
I like
this
this
is-
text. I like this text on the screen, and I would agree with this. I would agree with this text. Even before the sun and the constellations were created, before the stars of heaven were made, his name was named in front of the Lord of Spirits. Lord of Spirits, I would take there to mean Yahweh, the mighty one of spirits. And I believe that Yeshua's name was named. I believe that Yeshua was crucified. He was the lamb slain before the foundations of the world, but not literally hanging on a tree or a cross, but it was already as good as done. Anything foreordained or predestined in Yahweh's perfect plan is as good as accomplished, but it doesn't get accomplished literally until the proper season or proper time. So I think Yeshua was named in front of the Lord of Spirits before all these things were created.
Yeah, and I also want to piggyback that, there is this Greek way of understanding this language in the Bible of something that was seemed to pre-exist or was already happening to be spoken in past tense is known as heterosis. And it's anything that Yahweh has promised or Yahweh has said will happen is spoken of in past tense, because anything that Yahweh promises is good as done, even though it's in the future. Just like it says that we will be saved, right? Past tense, but we're talking about the salvation to come. There's several other examples I really quick wanted to
It's
point
interesting.
out.
I've never heard that literary term heterosis.
Yeah.
Because it's actually sounds like prolepsis.
Ah.
To speak of a future event as if it's already done.
Or I like to call it the prophetic perfect.
Yeah, I call it
Is
Hebrew
that the
1,
same thing?
faith speak. But yeah, I agree. It's the same concept. So that's interesting. I'll look up heterosis. Sounds like a cancer, but yeah, I got heterosis in my verbal theology. But no, no, prolepsis sounds like a disease as well.
There's some good examples even with us believers. The blood of the prophets before the foundations of the world. Luke 11, verse 50. The blood of the prophets, I believe it says, were spilled before the foundation of the world. Ephesians 1:4, Elohim chose us in him before the foundations of the world. And I could play devil's advocate and say, well, then I guess we pre-existed, because he chose me before the morning star, And then there's others, but I don't like to speak too much and sound like a formal debate.
Brother Sean, can I couple in Luke 1? I love that you brought that text up. It's one of my favorite New Testament texts. I want to couple Matthew 1 with it, because Matthew 1 also teaches the virgin conception. Right. And we would say, like, Matthew 1 piggybacks, if it's okay to say piggy, we're Torah keepers. It piggybacks off of the Tanakh, in that the promised Davidic Messiah, Matthew 1:1, starts off the generation, which is the Greek word Genesis, the beginning of Yeshua the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then it gives a genealogy. So we're talking about a human being that's a descendant. Once again, he's a descendant of David and Abraham. Yeah, and then it goes down and go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just quick question though, because you have already acknowledged, just so the viewers don't get lost, you have already acknowledged that you believe in the Holy Spirit overshadowing Mary and conceiving not with the sperm of Joseph, but through the power of God's Spirit. Is that what you said earlier? Okay, so you do agree with that. But absolutely, by mentioning this and making the statement you just did, you're just saying he's counted as in the family genealogy of David back to Abraham, because he's in the line of Mary and Joseph.
I would say two ways. I think this proves that Mary had Davidic DNA in her, number one, and it's okay for it to come through women. We have the daughters of Zelophehad in the book of Numbers. Mm-hmm. But I also think that he's legally Joseph's son by adoption. I think Luke 3:23 uses the word as was customary or supposed. Yeah. And adoption is a very Hebraic concept. So both ways, I think. But the point is that Matthew 1 starts off by saying this is the beginning. This is the genesis of Jesus Christ. He's the son of Abraham, the son of David. And then it gives a genealogy. This guy begat this guy. genao, meaning that, Abraham begat Isaac. Isaac came into existence after Abraham, and then it goes on down. Then it speaks of that which is begotten in the womb of Mary. And if you study the word begotten in Greek, it has to do with coming into existence, not a literal pre-existence and incarnation, but somebody that comes into existence. So he was definitely a special man. That's why I mentioned Adam being created from the dust of the earth, and being son of God.
Okay.
Yeshua is the second man, Adam. He had a unique creation. He's the beginning of this new creation that Yahweh is making for the kingdom that is to come. And he's so special. We're not saying that he's just, a prophet like Islam, or although he is a prophet, but he's not just a prophet. We're not saying he's just some Joe Blow down the street Israelite man. He's the most special man to ever walk the face of the earth. There'll never be another man like him. He's the head of every man. And right now he's second in command over the entire heavens and earth. I mean, that's very, very special.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
So it's been said a couple times, though, that you guys have made the comparison that somebody who's a descendant of people like Abraham and David, that he could not have existed before then. So I'm sure you guys hear this verse all the time, and I'm very curious to hear how you interpret it. John 8:58, of course, where he says, before Abraham was, I am. Before Abraham was born, I am, even in this translation. So I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a good verse. I love that text. So I think that the I am he, I think it should say I am he, because of the lack of the predicate there. So before Abraham was, I am he. And I think that refers back to the beginning of the Gospel of John, in John 4, when he's talking with the woman at the well, and she says, when the Messiah comes, he'll tell us all of these things. And Yeshua says, I am he, ego eimi. And so if you fast forward that up to John 8, I think he's still claiming the same thing. I'm the Messiah. I'm the promised one. And the before Abraham part, I believe it's referring to, as the passage in Enoch said, he was named before Abraham ever existed. He was already.
What are you saying by using the word name? What do you think Enoch is saying in that passage when he's saying he was named?
I would say in the plan, the text that you put on the screen, it says he was named in front of the Lord of Spirits. I don't think that text, just reading it, says that he had to be in a literal existence right there, but that he could be spoken about and foretold before all of these things. And I think that's what John 8 is talking about. I think the Pharisees misunderstood him. He said, Abraham rejoiced to see my day, not me, but Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. And the Pharisees, they don't get it right. They say, you're not even 50 years old, and how can you say you've seen Abraham? And they're taking him literally, but he's speaking spiritually there in that text. He's saying, before Abraham existed, I am he. I am the Messiah, the promised Messiah. And they pick up stones to stone him because they think that he's blaspheming, probably because they didn't believe he was the Messiah. I don't think they thought he was saying he was Yahweh there, but I think they just thought, no, this guy's not the Messiah. He's got a demon, and all of that. So
some good
if I may, I'm
Sure.
sorry, John, just 1 second to address before we get away from what he just mentioned. So in this passage, Matthew, that you were just referencing, we had on screen a minute ago from Enoch 48, it says in verse 2, at that hour. So it's given like a specific qualifier of time.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to the qualifier that we had already read, it was before the sun, moon, and stars. But it also says that he was named in the presence of the Lord of Spirits.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying that he was just announced in front of the angels? Because that's
what it sounds like to me in that text. Be like if I was standing up in front of the congregation here in Georgia, and I named Sean Griffin in front of the presence of the congregation, it'd be kind of an illustration.
It doesn't say in front of the presence of the congregation. It says in the presence of the Lord of Spirits.
Sure. So in the presence of the Lord of Spirits, that's Yahweh. That's the Most High.
But he's the one talking, though. So like, if I would never stand up in front of a group of people and say, hey, I'm going to go to the store. In the presence of me, I say this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand. To me, the language is pretty clear that it's like he's saying this to all of the people he would need to announce it to. And that, in my understanding, if mankind hasn't been created yet, because this is before even day 4, Jubilees and Enoch, and I would even say Job chapter 38, let us know that the angels were created on day one. And it's specifically stated in the book of Jubilees, they were created on day one. So that would be the audience to whom he actually announces this to. And there would be, this is just my interpretation for the audience, since, just as a response to what you said.
Sure.
This would be the whole point of this conversation being recorded, was that there's a reason for the angels need to know who's in charge. All right. So he has to announce and name him in the presence of the Lord of Spirits, so it validates that information. And then we see that, they have the audience of the angels there. Right. So that's, to me, a reason, like a practical reason that this would even be recorded. And to me, it goes in line with Yeshua's statement in John chapter 18, verse 36, where he's telling Herod that, my kingdom is not of this earth. And so he's already in charge of the angels in heaven above, but he would have just, dethroned in order to take on this mission and be sent. So I'm sorry, John, to interrupt you, but what?
No, it's
okay, saying,
John.
No, yeah, I was just going to say that a lot of this language can be found with us believers, us saints also. In the Bible, you can see in Luke 11:50, as I quoted, but 2 Timothy 1:9, we are given grace in Yeshua Messiah before the world was. How can I be given anything before the world was unless I was there? Well, in the mind of Yahweh. Mm-hmm. Hebrews 4:3, works finished from the foundations of the world. I don't know, that's not literal, but we can play the devil's advocate, right? And when we see Book of Enoch, chapter 48 or whatnot, it's the same kind of language. And Revelation 13:8, he was slain before the foundation of the world, but we know before the sun was created, there was no crucifixion.
Absolutely. And let me put this on screen because I was going to mention this. This plays right into the verse we just had on screen, but let me actually share it from this passage here because this gives you the rest of the story, right? What that slide that WesBlaze made, it only has verse 2 and 3. So if we go down to verse 4 in that same chapter of Enoch, where it's prophesying the Messiah and explaining what I would suggest is explaining that he's being given that authority over the angels, announced in the presence of the Father, so the angels know what's up, what's the authority structure of heaven. He then explains, like you're talking about, John, why we're given that blessing before the world began, because it was announced what he would do at the same moment, at that hour, like verse 2 says, at that hour, the Son of Man was named in the presence of the Lord of Spirits, so that he would do what? He would be a staff to the righteous, warn to stay themselves. And here we get into the Isaiah 57 language of him actually being the Messiah, a light to the Gentiles, a hope of all those who are troubled in heart. And then, of course, his actual reign on the earth when people worship him and praise him. And then it goes on to say, for this reason has he been chosen and hidden before him before the creation of the world and forevermore. So the context itself says that exactly what would line up with First Timothy 1:9, which is this idea that he was announced this is what he was going to do. He was chosen for this reason, and it was even told to all the angels before day 4, even before day 4.
I also like to think Jeremiah 1:5 is a good example where before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Another way of saying that is before you were born, I named you. But we don't think Jeremiah existed. And so again, I think we're not too far-fetched to say that Yahweh speaks like this quite often in the prophecies.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for the super sticker. I appreciate that.
Sorry, Sean, do you believe that the pre-existent Yeshua? I guess 2 questions here. Do you think he was named Yeshua pre-existently? And do you think he was an immortal being? Was he created immortal?
Everyone in heaven above is created immortal. If you're given a spiritual angelic style like body, a spiritual body is what it's actually technically called. That language is consistent both from Enoch to 1 Corinthians 15. Paul tries to expound the earthies first and then the spiritual, given the correlation, the chronology of the resurrection. But we only know that there's 2 kinds of concepts. Essentially, there's people of the earth and people of the heaven above, the spiritual nature. And so anyone that's born of heaven above, as First Enoch 15 expounds upon, is born immortal. And that was why people on the earth are supposed to, the meek inherit the earth. People on the earth inherit the earth. but people in heaven were supposed to live in heaven, and they were all called immortal beings, not needing wives. And this was actually explained in the furthering context where Yahweh is reprimanding the rebellious watchers for taking wives. And he's saying, you weren't appointed wives because you're immortal, holy, living the eternal life in heaven, right? Only mankind was given wives. And so, yes, I would say everything that's considered a spiritual being is immortal.
So my second question then would be, how did Yeshua die? If he was immortal, did he lose his immortality? Because immortality means deathlessness, not able to die.
I would say he wasn't in that same form. That was kind of the point of him being sent to the earth to become a man, is he no longer has immortality. That's he changes the nature thereof. So you guys can probably imagine I want to go to Philippians 2, right?
Sure, yeah.
And just for the audience, following along, I'll do this real quick just so they can understand what I'm getting at. I know your brothers are well versed and know this passage very well. So what do you guys say in regards to, who existed in the form of God? That's that word Elohim again.
Yeah. Morphe.
Did not consider equality with Elohim something to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking on the form of servant, being made in human likeness. Now, Yeshua in Isaiah 53 and Isaiah 42 is referred to as the servant sent. So this would be consistent in my understanding of why he would empty himself and take on the form of a servant and be made in human likeness, found in appearance as a man.
Put on.
I always like to use an analogy of what's that movie? What's the show with the owner of the company pretends to be an employee?
My undercover boss.
Yeah. Undercover boss.
Yeah.
And this idea that when the CEO of a company who is at a high status, at the top, empties himself to become the form of a servant. The word form is the outward appearance. So his outward appearance, he puts on the regular uniform of McDonald's or whatever and does a drive-through job, and sweeps the floor. He took on the form of a servant. I think that's how this language is meant to be read, and it wasn't meant to be saying like he was a mighty one, pre-existent, immortal, mighty one, and then took a human form and then went back to immortal.
Did you catch that, Wes? I didn't understand that. I'm sorry, John. Did you say, you already said earlier that Yeshua was a man while he's on the earth and only a man. We don't believe in a hypostatic union theology that he was fully man and fully God at the same time. So if he was non-existent before he became a man, and once he became a man, he's fully man, what is he emptying himself of in that interpretation you just gave?
Well, let's just say you're Donald Trump Jr. and you're supposed to inherit all of his business. But then someone strips you of all that so that you can become the form of a servant or a slave to walk the streets of New York City begging for money or just being poor. It's a status because what you were meant to be was up at the top of a high tower with lots of money and power. Yeshua was born from the descendants of David as the rightful heir as a Messiah. He's supposed to have a crown and a throne, but he took on the form of a servant as Ben Joseph. And then when he comes back, he's going to be the Ben David. But this idea is that the outward appearance of Yeshua is why a lot of times the Jews had a hard time accepting him as Messiah, because they're waiting for a king with a crown and an army, and he came as a servant, the outward appearance of a servant instead of a king. And so it's more of a status thing and not necessarily that if he was born human, how was he considered the form of God or whatnot.
I think Matthew wants to add on to that. Do you guys agree on that interpretation?
Well, probably for the most part. I want to point out that the beginning of chapter 2 is talking about Christian humility, how that we're supposed to not do anything out of selfish ambition or rivalry, but esteem our brothers and sisters better than ourselves. So this is the context. He's telling us, Christians, how to act. And then he gives us an example. He said, let this mind be in you, which was also in the Christ Jesus. Christ is a reference to the human Jesus. It's the Messiah, the Mashiach, the anointed one. And so it's not referring to pre-human existence here. It's talking about the Christ Jesus. And he existed in the Morphe Theou, the form of God, which should take our minds back to another man that was made in the image or the form of God, Adam. Adam was made in the form of God. And what did Adam do? He sought for an equality with God.
So wait, you're saying that the rest of mankind after Adam is not in the image of God?
No, not like Adam was. No, not like Adam was. No.
But he,
God created man upright, you know, and that's talking about Adam right there. That's Ecclesiastes 7. But
so
Adam
like
was
Seth wasn't Seth was a different person after that then? Like a different type of man?
Seth is said to be made in the image of and likeness of Adam. But Adam, in uniquely being the first man, Adam, the first man, he is in the unique image or form of God. And he grasped for an equality with God in the garden. Satan tempted and he fell. He didn't protect his wife, and then he ate of the forbidden fruit as well. But Yeshua didn't. When Yeshua was tempted, he didn't grasp for an equality with God. In each of the temptations that are mentioned there in Matthew 4 and also in the Gospel of Luke, Yeshua said, no, no, no. He didn't give in to temptation, even though the devil promised him all the kingdoms of this world. So he emptied himself, and he took upon himself the morphe of a servant. So he was in the morphe of God. He took upon himself the morphe of a servant and came as just this ordinary Joe Blow down the street. He even told people when he would heal them, don't tell anybody what I did. Don't tell
Yeah.
anybody.
Okay.
Therefore, God highly exalted him. Notice the exaltation is not before he's a man. The
Sure.
exaltation is after he submits himself, even
Right.
to death on the cross. And then he's given the name above every name, which I understand that phrase to mean the greatest reputation. And even to this day, when somebody speaks the name Jesus or Yeshua, there's no other person with a greater reputation than Jesus of Nazareth. So he was given that because of his great humility. And remember, verses 1-4, that's how us Christians are supposed to act. So Paul is not telling us Christians to act like a pre-incarnate spirit being that came down. He's telling us, you act like the Messiah acted. He had this great status, but he didn't use it to his advantage, and he didn't try to seek for an equality or grasp for an equality with Yahweh.
Okay. So
that's how I understand it.
I get it. Yeah, that interpretation though would hinge on verse 6 being what you just said. Though, would you kind of the common reading of it is the morphetheo. You're saying is in the form of God, as in the form of the image of God, and you're relating that back to Genesis 1:26-29.
Correct.
Instead of being in the form of an actual spiritual being, which is also a use for the word theo.
Correct. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I see how you interpret this text.
Yeah.
I understand that.
It's hard for me to make the connection you just did, not just because of I understand the connection that you're making with verses 1-5, because literally verse 5 says, let this mind be in you, right? Mm-hmm. Let this perspective, let this humble thought process be in you, right? Mm-hmm. So I get that for sure. I guess I struggle with understanding that there is an actual spiritual being nature that all the angels have. And then seeing that verse at the end of verse 7, it says being made in human likeness, being found in appearance as a man. Seems like very interesting language to someone who never knew anything different.
Yeah, I think, and I understand what you're saying. I think the intent of that is commoner, not just a man in the sense that that's not what he was when he was the Christ Jesus, but he just came as a commoner. He wasn't, like King Solomon, son of David. He was just, from a one light town, Nazareth, Bethlehem Ephratah, little among the thousands of Judah. He didn't have a grand birth. He didn't grow up in a grand town. Even his own family, when he went and preached in a synagogue in Luke 4, his own family tried to run him off the cliff, because the prophet's not without honor except in his own country. So
that may be a little bit subjective on what we're considering grand. I mean, being born of a virgin and having 3 wise men bring you all those valuable materials at your birth, being hunted by Herod to where you have to flee the country. I mean, that seems like a big deal. But
yeah, well, I agree. But I'm talking about how that, Nazareth, there's not even a historical record of a city named Nazareth outside of Scripture. And in the prophecy of Micah, it's Bethlehem Ephratah is little among the thousands of Judah, but yet out of these shall come forth a ruler that shall shepherd the people of Israel. So my point is that, shepherds were there at his birth, not the wise men didn't come till a little bit later, but shepherds were there at his birth, the low class in society. Yeah. That's my point. I agree with the virgin conception. I agree with all of that.
Well,
Also, I thought it was interesting when we look at that Bible verse you were sharing in Philippians. It had in parentheses Isaiah 52. I actually, before I even spotted that, was thinking this is a great example of Isaiah 52 and 53. That language where he blended in with everyone. He didn't stand out as some charming, good-looking king, and then he, was a humble servant. So when we read that suffering servant,
but
it's just like Philippians 2.
why even mention that he's being found in the appearance of a man if that's all he was ever to
Because
know?
when you look at Philippians, everybody was boasting and being proud, and they were saying, "Don't get caught up in your gifts. Don't get caught up in your skills or your status in your little ecclesia. Just know that your own boss, who's your prime example, who had every right to boast, every right to point the finger, took on every role as the undercover boss to sweep the floors, stay late, come in early, did everything he was supposed to as the perfect employee. Even though he's the owner, he shouldn't have to do it. And so have that mindset in you also, who has no place at the right hand of the Father. So you're below him. You should even be quicker to sweep the floor because your own master, Yeshua, was the perfect example of what kind of mindset you should have as servants."
Okay.
I'm sorry if I'm yelling. I just
no,
I'm a
it's
soft-spoken kind of guy. I've been told my whole life I'm soft-spoken, so now I overcompensate and I sound like I'm yelling. My hands start moving.
I don't think you are. I think it's good that the audience can hear you.
Okay.
WesBlaze, did you want to chime in before I go to the next section?
I'd love to look at we had started to look at Enoch 48. I think you had looked at a different translation of it because I favor I can't remember if it's the Richard Lawrence or the R.H. Charles, because if you'd go back to my slides on Enoch 48, that'd be awesome.
Verses 2 through 3 or 5 through 6?
5 through 6, please. Sir.
Okay, sure. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, just therefore the elect and concealed one, Yeshua, existed in his presence, existed before the world was created and forever. In his presence he existed and has revealed to the saints and to the righteous the wisdom of the Lord of spirits, for he has preserved a lot of the righteous because they have hated and rejected this world of iniquity and have detested all its works in ways in the name of the Lord of spirits. So I favor this translation, obviously just because it says he did exist indeed. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I think that's a good verse for your position.
Yeah.
When I'm reading, I'm sorry, Matt. I don't mean to interrupt. Go for it.
No, I was just saying I don't mind if you make a good point. I don't mind saying this. It's a good point. That's if I took your position, I would definitely bring this text up. Yeah.
Sure.
Do you guys agree that the elect and the concealed one could say the elect is the same one as at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, the sixth line, it says, has revealed to the saints and to the righteous, that would be us. I would say like it's sounding like we pre-existed also, because he's saying that he was revealed to the saints at this time in Enoch 48, which seems to be in the presence before the world was created.
I would say that these are two titles, concealed one and elect, are both used of the Son of Man, the Messiah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's just say the elect is Yeshua. So I'm going to say, therefore, the elect, Yeshua, and the concealed one, Yeshua, existed in his presence, Yahweh the Father, before the world was created and forever. In his presence, he existed and has revealed to the saints and to the righteous. That would be us, correct?
Mm-hmm. Well,
and so I can't help but wonder,
in the book of Enoch, the angels are also called the elect, the saints, and the righteous. Because remember, they're a part of the family of Israel with us. They're just in a different location.
Okay, so those are not us. Those are angels.
No, I'm just saying like that. Go ahead. I shouldn't have interrupted you. Go ahead, brother.
You're okay. I'm just trying to understand Enoch. I don't read Enoch, but I'm just the first time setting my eyes on Enoch 48. I'm trying to skim through it. And
Sean was just saying it could be both. That the saints could be both angels in heaven and mankind.
Okay, because when I keep reading here at the semicolon, for he has preserved a lot of the righteous. So it sounds like he's preserving something for us, not angels, correct?
The word lot is the word for inheritance. And we all know that the inheritance is what he's king over, which is the New Jerusalem, which is the inheritance of the saints. Yeah, that would be.
Yeah. So I can't help but say, well, we don't know if the righteous or the saints were angels or humans. But then when we continue reading, it sounds like the context is saying it's talking about us.
Mankind. Yes, sir.
Yeah, mankind. And so if that is our understanding, to a certain extent, we have to say that this language used in Enoch 48 is used continuously for not only the elect concealed one, but also for the saints who is us. I don't know proper grammar here, but do you know what I mean? You know, is that now we're pre-existing also.
I don't see that from that.
No, it
passage.
doesn't say that. It actually talks about in 1 Enoch 48, the rest of this chapter, how, or no, excuse me, 1 Enoch 47, how the actual amount of saints to be saved is consistent with the number of stars in the sky. So this is why you would have in Revelation 6, the angel tell the voices from under the altar crying out for vengeance, that you must wait until anyway, but that's a deeper study. But the point is, no, actually the book of Enoch talks about makes a distinguishment between the actual saints of the earth that are born and how it does not pretend that they pre-existed in any way, nor does it speak of them like that. And this elect one in verse 48, verse 5 is consistent with chapter 61 of 1 Enoch. I think it's verse 10.
I think that's the very next slide, if you would.
Oh, is it?
It's short, the last one on that one.
Yeah, right here.
Then shall the kings, the princes, and all who possess the earth glorify him who has dominion over all things, him who was concealed. So the kings, the princes, all who possess the earth being mankind, and thereat being said that they will glorify the Messiah, the concealed Son of Man. For from the beginning the Son of Man existed in secret, whom the Most High preserved in the presence of his power and revealed to the elect. If you guys ever want to check out my channel, if you just type in Kingdom in Context, History and Timeline, and I go through the entire manuscript history of the book of Enoch, both the Latin, the Greek, the Hebrew, the Paleo-Hebrew, the Syriac, I talk about all of it. And I go through the Dead Sea Scroll findings. I go through, so I talk about, it's a compilation of 6 different scrolls, including the book of Noah. We do make a strong delineation on my channel, and I think WesBlaze is in agreement. We do not give weight or authority to the books of 2nd and 3rd Enoch. Right. There's no manuscript chain of custody or historical, even some of the theology taught in there doesn't line up. But the book of 1st Enoch, I have not found anything that is out of order with everything taught in the canon that we do know and are familiar with, the 66. So for your consideration, I would, highly recommend studying the book of Enoch. John, I know you said you thought it was pseudepigraphal. Have you ever had a chance to study it out? Have you ever read the book of Enoch?
Yeah. So when I was looking up, all the quote unquote scholars have said it's all pseudepigrapha, but I don't have like notes on, at hand. I wasn't prepared to have an Enoch discussion. So I can talk about Balaam. I have notes on Balaam. Sure. Find that in the Bible.
It's interesting because, pseudepigrapha usually means that it's written by someone, but ascribed to somebody else than it was written to, right? Because we do agree that the collection known as what we have of 1st Enoch was written by partially Enoch, Methuselah, Noah. And so there's that collection there that has been pieced together and given the name Enoch. But we would ascribe that the prophet Enoch did have these words, some of those words scribed for sure.
And all of it would have been copied and rescribed by Ezra in the 6th century BC anyway. So it's only because of Ezra that we even have the fragments we still do. So yeah, I think it's an interesting study. I know that there are other, had we all grown up in Ethiopia, we wouldn't even question Enoch. It would just be a part of our daily reading.
That was the other thing I was going to say is I ran across a Ge'ez translation from, Ge'ez to the English from the Ethiopic, antiquity. And that a part of the slides that I had was from some of the wording from that. So it all attests to some of the other translations that we have, like in the Greek and the Aramaic.
So this is real quick for everyone in the chat. I apologize. We're not getting to your questions tonight. We didn't actually announce that we were going to do questions during this. Some of our brothers on the panel tonight only have a short amount of time with us, so we're trying to maximize that. So we won't be taking live questions as it is. We're barely scratching the surface of everything we want to talk about. All these questions are about different things.
Just in case, because I have to sign off at 8:30 pretty succinctly. So I just want to say this in case I don't get a chance to. I want everybody that's listening now or later on to recognize, and this is me speaking, okay, from Brother Matthew. I don't believe that this is a topic. I think it's good for us to discuss this topic. I think we should discuss it. Iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. I don't think this is something that we should disfellowship people over or shun people over if they see it different than we do. Brother Sean and Brother Wes and myself and John, we all believe in Yahweh, the Father, Yeshua, the Son, the Messiah, and keeping of the commandments, which is Revelation, 12, 17, 14, 12. That's the testimony of the saints. So I just want, if you discuss this, people that are listening, if you end up discussing this with your brothers and sisters, never let it be a point of contention to the point that you say, well, I can't fellowship that person, or they're not a brother, or I'm putting a mark on them, or something like that. This is not one of those subjects that you should do that over. Just want that to be clarified before I have to get off.
I 100% agree. Yeah, absolutely. And furthermore, I love that we can get together and have these conversations in a civil, loving way so that, we can kind of build our understanding to have these conversations with other people, knowing what some other people say and believe and interpret these passages so that we can have more effective and productive conversations with others too. So it's a beautiful thing.
And on that note, I got to ask you about this before you guys have to go. John 1:15. We haven't addressed this yet tonight. John testified concerning him, speaking of Yeshua, the one who became flesh. He cried out, saying, "This is he of whom I said, he who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me."
Right.
You guys make of that?
Yeah, that last phrase can be translated because he ranks higher than I. Protos in the Greek can refer to, once again, it can refer to before in time or before in rank. And so I don't have all my translations in front of me, but it can be rendered, "This is he of whom I said, he who comes after me has surpassed me because he ranks higher than I," protos. So that's how I take John 1:15. Yeah.
And
what about you,
you
John?
would say maybe
same
both,
here.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
same here. It's about rank, and also John the Baptist later on says that he has sandals I'm not worthy to untie. Pretty much I can't fill his shoes. It's about his importance and rank.
All right. So you guys are saying that Greek word used as before normally is used in the if it's not used as a chronological time placement, we see it elsewhere. We see this term before as translated as the English word before me means he's in the presence of. But you're saying it's neither two of those translations. It's he's higher in rank than me.
Yes. Most of the translations on these texts are going to be translated by Trinitarian scholars, and they all believe that Yeshua had a pre-human existence before John, and so they're going to translate it. The HCSB, my favorite Bible translation, says he existed before me, and I think that's just taking too much liberty there with the text. But and it's not that protos, it's like Wes said, it could be both, it could be one, it could be the other. I'm not saying protos can't be translated as before in time. I'm just saying that it can also be understood as before, chief in rank.
Okay. And I think WesBlaze had a question for you guys on this right here. What do you guys? This is a big one right here for me.
Yeah, me
I thought
too.
It was gonna be John 17:5.
No, just in the sense of how would he have come down or descend from heaven if he did not exist in heaven?
Yeah.
Can I go?
Man. Yeah, go ahead, John.
So I was wrestling with John 3 for a good week and a half to 2 weeks. And when I kept praying about it, that's when I felt like the Spirit was finally giving me the answers. And it wasn't until I prayed. So praise John, give him all the glory. But this has everything to do with being ascended from the grave and descended into the grave. It's about the topic of how does one become born again. Nicodemus comes to him late at night in John 3 and says, "How do I have eternal life?" Yeshua is talking about one must be born again. So one must die and then be born again. And so the ascending and descending, if you continue reading in John 3, he says he needs to be ascended to a cross like the serpent and then descended. So there's a lot of language about his death, burial, and resurrection. And it's not necessarily about him pre-existing.
Okay, but this particular verse says no one has ascended into heaven. So that's given us a pretty strong qualifier of what it's talking about. Mm-hmm. But he who descended from heaven.
And I agree with the surrounding context. He is talking about the resurrection, death,
right.
burial, then rise again, right? Be given an eternal, glorified heavenly body. However, I heard two things there. You said descending into the grave and descending from the cross, but this says descended from heaven. So that's, and do y'all, John, if you would, do you define heaven like Genesis 1, verse 8 does, where it gives the name heaven to the solid structure of the firmament? I don't know where you are on that. Is heaven a physical thing above us, like a place?
Oh yeah, there's I believe there's 3 heavens, but from your background, it looks like there could be 7.
Sure. So you do say that it's
So do you believe
above us,
then
literally.
that heaven is literally above us, as the scriptures talk about?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
cool.
So not like some like ethereal other dimensional realm that's covered by veil, but like literally above us.
A physical,
Yeah.
tangible place. Yeah.
Yeah, and if Yeshua ascended into the skies above the clouds, I don't know what happened after that, and who
Hebrews
knows?
4:14.
There you go.
He ascended through the
I don't know if
firmament,
it was
through the
I don't know if it
heavens.
was a 3-hour drive or if it was a 30-minute drive. I don't know
Yeah.
how far up he went, but
So y'all give me just a couple of minutes to deal with these texts right here, and
I'd love to.
I have
Yeah.
I have to get off here at 8:30. Is something important.
Please do.
So I'll backtrack from John 6. In John 6:51, I am the living bread that came down out of heaven. And Yeshua equates the living bread with his flesh. So he's saying in John 6, my flesh came from heaven. So he's not speaking literally there. Every good and perfect gift cometh down from the Father of lights. James 1 says this. And there's a case where Yeshua is discussing with the Pharisees, and he says, let me ask you a question. The baptism of John, is it from heaven or is it from men? And now, Yeshua is not saying the baptism of John floated down out of heaven. It means it comes with heavenly authority. And so that's what I think he's saying in John 6. It may also, 6, the entirety of John 6, where that phrase is used, it may also refer to the virgin conception. And that Yeshua...
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but are you saying 651? You're saying the metaphor he's making about being the bread of heaven. You're saying because he made a metaphor in verse 51, we didn't take any other passage in John chapter 6 as not a literal statement, but a metaphor?
Correct. Yeah, John 6, where he says, for I've come down from heaven, he's talking about his flesh. So it has to be metaphorical. It can't be literal. His flesh didn't come down from heaven. Not Trinitarians, Arians, nobody believes that. His flesh didn't begin to exist until he was born in Bethlehem. And that's what he's talking about. The living bread is his flesh. He even says, unless you eat my flesh, you have no life. You have no part with me in John 6.
Well, he does in 6:35. He says, I'm the bread of life.
Right. But the whole context is about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. He says, you have no part from me. So he comes with heavenly backing. John 3, I think, is talking about heavenly knowledge. I think the backdrop verse to that is Proverbs 30. Who hath ascended into heaven or descended? It's talking about nobody has heavenly knowledge as Yeshua does. If I told you earthly things and you believe me, how will you not believe if I tell you heavenly things? No man hath ascended into heaven, but he who descended from heaven. So he has heavenly backing. He came down from heaven in the same sense that John's baptism came from heaven. It has the authority of Yahweh behind it.
That's what I was going to say too, is that John the Baptist says, or Yeshua asks the rhetorical question, does John the Baptist's baptism come from heaven or from man? The answer is from heaven, but we don't think that the River Jordan or the water that John used literally came down from above.
Now, there are definitely John 3, some other places, Matthew 3. There are definitely places where he says that, my authority is given me by the Father. So if we know the Father's in heaven, then it's logical to conclude that, his authority comes from heaven. But so I see. So I think a lot of this comes upon interpretive stance, as far as some places it's a word interpreted differently. Other places it's looking at a different contextual interpretation.
Sure.
And then there's some other places though that what has anyone ever asked you guys about all these mentions where Jesus says he's sent from heaven?
Yeah, to be sent from heaven is to be sent by the Father, and I believe the prophets could have said it. They were sent by the Father also, or Moses.
Yeah, but none of them claim to be sent from heaven though. No, not one prophet claimed.
I would say virgin conception. That's what I would say. He's the stone that broke off of the mountain without the hand of a man, Daniel 2. Virgin conception. So, yeah, I have no problem with that. But sent from the
doesn't
Father,
that mean, so to say sent from heaven equals virgin conception, that's still the womb of a woman on the earth. And then he's ordained and commissioned. We don't really get that part of the story of his childhood to know how he came into the full awareness of him being the Messiah. It's, greatly debated by scholars, right? But okay, so I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
just it's okay if we disagree, but I definitely don't see that connection as far as saying he's the only prophet ever to claim he's sent down from heaven to mean he's born of a woman.
And he's the only man ever to be born of a virgin. So he didn't have an earthly father. Yahweh
Okay.
was his father. He was uniquely begotten. I love you, brothers. I've got to go. I don't want to go, but I have to.
Thank you so much for coming on, Matthew. I really
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you for
getting
being
to hear
here.
your understandings.
Yeah, I love all of you. I don't know if I even know. Oh, here we go. Listen, y'all have a good rest of the evening. Don't have too much fun without me.
Had a good time.
You
Thank
too,
you.
brother.
Great to hear some good
Shalom.
perspective.
Shalom to you.
Sweet. John, do you want to add on to what he was saying?
Oh no, I just took a screenshot, snippet of your sent from heaven, and I'm going to go through some of those and make sure that I've combed through all of it. I like taking the hardest topics and going through it. I try to take the smartest Trinitarians, Michael Brown, Dr. White, and say, okay, what do they have? What's their biggest ace card? And so, I'd like to go through this one because what you're saying is no one else has ever been said to be sent from heaven, correct?
Never heard of a prophet amongst men that ever claimed that.
Other than angels. So the only, yeah.
So I guess in that regard, for the sake of the audience, I know there's people shouting in the audience this passage. So here is the moment you get to address this passage, John 17:5. I know you've been waiting on it.
No, I just thought it's like the go-to number one most favorite Yeshua pre-existed Bible verse. So I guess I was waiting for it. So
sure. How do you guys handle this one?
So pretty much it's his glory that he had from the beginning, promised by the Father, and he's asking to have that glory now as he has accomplished everything that he was told to do, and he's resurrected as a glorified being.
Now, respectfully, this is before the resurrection. And and you added a word into the verse that's not there just then. So this is not the glory that he had. This is him saying the glory that I had when I was with you before the world was.
No, yeah. So what I was saying is that he just is about to finish his ministry in John 17, I believe, is right when he's about to finish his ministry, correct?
Yeah, this is like right before the cross. He says, glorify me together with yourself, with the glory which I had with you before the world was.
Yeah. So to address what you were saying is that, he hasn't died yet. He's speaking because he's speaking as if he's about to finish up his ministry, and pretty much saying, I did everything you asked. I'm about to die on the cross. So give me that glory at the resurrection that everything has been mentioned of in the Torah that I've read about. We know that glory has been there from the beginning, the promise, the plan, everything, and that now he's saying, let me have it.
You're saying he's assuming into his statement your already stated interpretation tonight, which is his glory was just in the mind, will, intention of the Father, and that Yeshua is assuming that in this statement.
Who's assuming what? I'm multitasking. I'm trying to.
You want me to give you a minute here?
Yeah, okay. You're good. First,
so in John 17:5 on screen in front of us, where it says the glory which I had with you before the world was. Right. So he's already signified in this passage, together with yourself, glorify me together with yourself with, and now he's referencing something with the past tense, the glory I had with you before the world was.
Right.
So this is not post-cross. He hasn't gone to the cross yet. We understand he's going to be glorified. That is the promise of his resurrection and being exalted at the right hand of the Father in his high priestly position. That was prophesied of him, and that was the intention for the Messiah. But that just doesn't seem to be the wording here.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the heterosis or the prophetic perfect. So just because Yeshua is speaking in past tense doesn't mean that it's happened in the past, but that when Yahweh promises something, it's as good as done. And so you can't speak of it in a past tense language. I have a couple verses I want to share. 1 Peter 1:19-21 says, but with the precious blood of Messiah, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot, he was foreknown before the foundations of the world, but was made manifest in these last times for the sake of you who through him are believers in Elohim, Yahweh, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory. Right there. He gave him the glory when he raised him from the dead. It doesn't mention that he had glory before that. And the other verse I wanted to share was Romans 8:29. For those whom he foreknew, again, the Logos, and this is like, I'm not even doing justice with what Logos means. So I always encourage everybody to please study it from a Unitarian perspective. And not only that, if you want, check out my channel. I've gotten like 30 something videos that pertain to Philippians 2, John 1:1, all these verses. But it says in Romans 8:29, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son, in order that we might be the firstborn among many brethren. So we can even say, give me the glory that was given to me, or let me look at it exactly word for word, so you don't think I'm
It's okay. I'm bringing it up on the screen for you. No, you did well with it. I'm bringing it up on the screen for everybody to see. Because yeah, I mean, this is to me, this would fall in complete synchronous with the idea, the promise of the resurrection. So this is the promise of the covenant given to all of mankind, is that, you know, you're going to get at the resurrection, you get the laws of God in your heart. You never sin again. 1 Enoch 5:6-9. It states that clearly. You never sin again. So you're never subject to the divine anger or wrath of God. And yes, if Yeshua never sinned, he's a perfect example of how to be as a man. And we get that same behavior at the resurrection. This will make perfect sense that he did predestine those whom he foreknew. So so everyone that's going to take part in that first resurrection as a saint of God is going to be conformed to the image of his son.
I also wanted to include verse 30, and I should have, and I guess I didn't even see that I wrote 29-30, but that word glorified is past tense there in regards to us. And those he predestined, he also called, and those he called, he justified, past tense, and those he justified, past tense, he glorified, past tense. But we know this is all in the future.
Now, we definitely agree that this is what I was mentioning as prolepsis. I just didn't hear the synonym to it as heterosis, but we definitely agree that there is a literary concept used all throughout Old and New Testament, mostly in the New Testament, and we would commonly refer to it on my channel as prolepsis, where it speaks about things of the promise of the covenant that haven't happened yet, as if they've already happened, because you're so sure that God is going to do it. You know he's not going to fail to fulfill that promise.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see that point that you're making there.
Thank you. And I'm going to start trying to say prolepsis, because maybe, like you're saying, heterosis sounds too much like a cancer. So
I had to look that up. I hadn't heard of that either, but the only definition I came up with was the tendency of a crossbred individual to show qualities superior to those of both parents. Maybe there's a different definition.
And maybe once we publish this video, I'm going to put the correct spelling and wordage of all that. Cool. But not only that, but if you want to find an easier way, just put in prophetic perfect, Hebrew writings, prophetic perfect.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. WesBlaze, any other verses you wanted to talk about or look at?
I have questions too, by the way. I didn't know if I could ask.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, WesBlaze,
if you have any okay, well, I was just going to say about John 17:5, just when he said, with the glory which I had with you before the world was, just the way I interpret these words, it just sounds like if you and I had a sandwich yesterday and I had that sandwich with you, we split it down the middle, I shared it with you, I wouldn't assume that I have to have been born today and didn't exist yesterday. So that's just how I read it, but that he did literally exist and had the glory with the Father before the world was.
Right.
But I understand there's a different way to interpret it. I see.
There's like this whole chapter, there's a couple of verses that I could have pointed out, but I don't want to spend too much time on that, because I actually want to ask a lot of questions. No, just 3 questions, actually. I speak hyperbolically sometimes. So I guess the one question I have is, Yeshua was born. It says that he had to grow in wisdom, but yet you guys believe that he was from the beginning in Genesis. If he is from the beginning,
well, that's a straw man, real quick. That we don't believe. That would be a Trinitarian hypostatic union mindset. We're not Trinitarians, so we don't believe that. We believe that he existed before he was born of the womb of a woman, but we don't assume that just the moment he's birthed into the birth canal in the womb of Mary that he had all the fullness of knowledge and wisdom.
Okay, but
we actually tried to make a distinction that he actually changed natures. The same 2 natures that Paul tries to expound upon in 1 Corinthians 15. He went from the spiritual to the earthy, right? And so then at the resurrection, he goes back to the spiritual. But I would actually infer from 1 Corinthians that he's actually a new creation, because he's the first among mankind to be glorified. That's never happened before until his resurrection. But I'm sorry to digress.
You're good. I mean, I wasn't going to go with the idea that he's, just like Yahweh with eternal, forever, infinite wisdom. But what I was saying is, like, if you're alive for at least 50 to 60 to 80 years, you got some wisdom, right? So Yeshua, if he had pre-existed as for, let's just say, 4,000 years, there's a lot of wisdom there. There's a lot of time of existence to grow wisdom. And yet when he's born, it says that he had to grow in wisdom. So what you guys believe is that he had a lot of wisdom because of his 4,000 year, or roughly 4,000 year existence from Genesis to Matthew. And then from Matthew, he kind of had to start over.
WesBlaze, do you want to
I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about it.
No, I'm not saying that he had to start. This is what I mentioned earlier. We don't have any kind of documentation on, other than the moment when he's at the temple when he's around 12 years old or so, and he tells his mother and father, I must be about my father's business. How did he know to say that? Was the story of the angel appearing both to his uncle John, whom John was mute for until he actually decided to name, Zacharias? Did he hear that story about, Zacharias and Elizabeth's angelic interaction at the temple versus Mary's interaction and Joseph with the angel explaining and announcing the birth of Jesus? And I mean, was all that explained to him? And he grew up with this amazing humility to be able to process that concept and then go forward in obedience. You know what I'm saying? A lot of that's just not explained. Like you said, Luke 2:42 just says he grew in stature and wisdom. Because
I would also
go ahead.
Sorry. I would also propose just the idea that he was a spectator for the most part, and he had some wisdom in the heavens as conceptual, but had not actually lived it amongst men. Whereas when he was born of the flesh, grew in wisdom that was experiential. Maybe it's just one way that comes to mind.
Yeah, John, this actually goes. I mean, because what you're asking is kind of like a functional. Let me take this off screen real quick. It's kind of like a functional question as far as like, it does relate to what Wes is getting at, as far as if God is the Father in heaven above, right? Psalm 130 or Psalm 33:1, like he views mankind like grasshoppers on the earth. And WesBlaze and I have tried to emphatically with, we're in season 2 now, an entire series where we go over the creation model and all the descriptions and the definitions of the words, the use and context, and fleshing out all the 500 plus descriptions that the Father gives us of his creation model and what he made and where he is at the top of that creation model, how we can look down on the earth, on the sons of men and their activities, and that there's an angelic priesthood involved that are his servants that go out and literally record the deeds of every man on the earth, whom then report back to a hierarchy of angelic priesthoods in the heavens above. What is Yeshua's experience if he did pre-exist? What is his experience up there? It's not like they're just standing on top of a big glass dome looking at mankind. Right? There's literally an entire structural hierarchy of angelic priests that relay the good and the bad of mankind for judgment. And so the house of God can make atonement over Israel's testament. Levi mentions, but ultimately, it's not like Yeshua is just playing the video game of mankind, in his high penthouse, and he gets to look and then he's like, oh, I can do that. I've played it so much, or I've seen it happen so much. I know exactly how to behave when I come down there. So no, we're not saying that either. We're not saying he carried over any wisdom, but at the same time, I've got to admit there's nothing stated in the scriptures that helps me definitively declare how he knew within his heart of hearts as a young man growing up and hearing and believing his parents' story about him. And did angels appear to him and kind of talk to him from time to time and validate, like we see with all the other patriarchs and the prophets? Like they had a ton of angelic visitation to really affirm that they were anointed as a prophet of God and like they were on the right track and they weren't crazy. And you know what I'm saying? So like, we don't get that with Yeshua. We get, he's born, he's 12, and then suddenly he's around 30-ish. You know what I mean? Like we don't get that. So I don't believe in a hypostatic concept because I don't think the scriptures teach that. I do believe he was fully man while he was in the flesh, but as Hebrews 5:7-10 explains, that was while his days are in the flesh, and now he's been glorified and he's out of the flesh. I do see, things like John 17:5, Philippians 2:7, 1 Enoch 48, and other passages to announce that he was sent from God, from heaven, to be manifested. 1 Timothy 3:16. That would be the next passage, John. I'd love for you to talk on how you guys interpret 1 Timothy 3:16, because he's manifested in the flesh. To me, this would go back to Philippians 2:7, right? Being found in the appearance of man. So what do you guys think about that?
Or what Matthew was referring to earlier as an incarnation, right? The mystery of godliness that he manifested in the flesh, or incarnated, if you want to use that word.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pull it up right now, and
okay, I'll put it on screen for us.
Okay. 1 Timothy 3. I like it, the whole chapter, nice and contexty.
And the translation or the version can matter, because a lot of Trinitarians will use the King James. It just says God was manifest in the flesh, but we have a different understanding of the definition of Elohim and Theos than most Trinitarians do, obviously.
Yeah.
Because they always want to make it, even though you try to get them to define it, they end up tripping over themselves. But they always want to make it.
Yeah.
Like
So
a name for the Father.
Godhead.
Yeah. There's oh man, you guys have debated Trinitarians. There's got to be hundreds of verses that you have to be prepared to give an answer to. And so some of them aren't addressed for long periods of time. And so someone pulls it up and you're like, let me dust this thing off real quick. So I'm dusting off 1 Timothy 3 real quick. But from the translation of NASB, New American Standard Bible, it says that he who was revealed in the flesh, and it's bringing back jogging my memory that there are translations that say he instead of God was revealed in the flesh, right? Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, the he being the Messiah, Yeshua.
Just like, what's the whole point? And this is what Paul, we've tried to explain to Trinitarians. This is what Paul is explaining as the mystery of godliness, which is the transition from someone that's not of the flesh being revealed or being appeared in the flesh, and then being taken up in glory again. So that's that transition from spiritual being to mortal fleshly being back to an eternal spiritual being. That's that process that's considered the mystery of God, because Paul doesn't know how does this work, which is pretty much Matthew's question like an hour ago, which was like, how does this actually happen? Like, how does he go from an eternal nature into a non-eternal nature? And that's why I believe Paul's telling us this is a mystery. Like, even Paul doesn't know.
Yeah, so I guess I didn't get to say this earlier, but I don't believe Yeshua is not a human today. I do believe he's a glorified man today. Verses that I go to would be like when he resurrected. He said, touch my flesh, put your fingers in my wound, and, prove
but
that
you
I'm
would
not
agree that he's a glorified man, right?
Yeah, but he's a human with a heart, blood, veins. Yeah.
Resurrected,
but glorified, in the sense that he's eternal. He's seated at the right hand of the Father, and he's in charge,
Yeah. And I mean, that was the promise of the covenant, was that man would be glorified even above the angels. And that's the beauty of it, right? The last become first. But ultimately, he does have more capability than a regular man. So you're not saying like he's still a normal mortal man. He's definitely shown he's got more capability. This is what Yeshua promises us in Luke 20, verse 36, that we'll be made like the angels at the resurrection.
Yeah. What was that first what?
What's that?
You just quoted a verse. What was that?
Luke 20, verse 36.
Okay, because I thought you were going with the 1 Peter one, which I thought was perfect, because it says that we will be given a divine nature also, and that I don't believe we're going to resurrect as non-humans. And it's just an example to compare, like Yeshua is the firstborn of what we will become. We're all going to resurrect as humans, but with glorified bodies, meaning sinless, with authority to judge the angels and nations and stuff like that. But we don't transfer into like a non-human or nothing.
No, I like to call them superhumans, resurrected
superhuman.
Yeah.
So I always try to point back to this passage on screen here, just as I believe Paul does a masterful job at explaining the difference of the two natures and what's promised to us of the resurrection. Okay. So he says in verse 42, so will it be with the resurrection of the dead? What is sown as perishable is raised imperishable. It's sown in dishonor, it's raised in glory. It's sown in weakness, it's raised in power. It's sown a natural body, it's raised a spiritual body. So I do believe that we're still man, but we're glorified and we are given a spiritual body. So we're
Mhm.
not given the same body that was made in Genesis 2:7 from the dirt of the earth and the breath of God. We are
Okay.
given a spiritual body like the angels that is immortal and eternal, except
Mm-hmm.
we just have we have a better advantage than the angels. We get the actual fulfillments of the laws being written on our hearts so that we never sin again. To my understanding, that was never promised to angels because they already had an eternal nature, and we know they can sin.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, that
there
yeah, we
seems to
disagree on that
be,
too. Then,
you
Well,
think that angels cannot
you
sin?
believe in Satan, don't you?
yeah, I don't believe in Satan or fallen angels or none of that.
You don't
Oh.
believe in the devil, Satan. You don't believe in Azazel?
I believe the word Satan means adversary, and it's more of a title, but not that there's a specific
Interesting.
person that fell from heaven.
Do you believe in Peter? Was it Peter 3? The angels that sinned, chained up in Tartarus.
Yeah, I think that I again have to
Second
dust
Peter.
off some verses, but I believe that has a lot to do with humans or messengers.
Wait a minute. So do you believe that there are angels?
Yeah, but there aren't fallen angels, and that I don't believe fallen angels procreated with women and made, you know,
Understood.
I'm not trying to sound condescending, but angel,
That's
human,
all right.
demon things.
Oh, okay. Well, then, interesting. So,
Isn't
what?
it? By the way, isn't it cool how everything's connected, like
It is
overlapped?
connected. Yeah.
It's
This
like
is
that's why when you're like showing me Enoch, I'm like, this is so wild because I don't accept Enoch, and then there's this whole thing about what is scripture, and it's like everything's connected, man.
Have you ever seen our context tree from where we started this channel, Kingdom in Context?
Yeah, I listen to Kingdom in Context. Yeah.
But have you ever seen our context tree?
No, sorry, no.
It's a little graphic where I have different themes of the scriptures, and there's 13 different themes all throughout scripture on the context tree as its branches.
Okay.
And I made that a long time ago because I realized it was all connected. All these topics are connected,
Yep.
So that's interesting. If you don't mind me, slight little variance here. If you don't think that the angels rebelled, or 200 angels rebelled and took wives and had unclean spirits by them, then where do you see the origination of demons that tempted Yeshua that he had to cast out of people in the Gospels?
For there's probably really good scholarly wording for all this, but simple layman terms, I believe that demons don't exist. It's more of a mental illness or the flesh.
Oh, okay. What do you think was changing? Okay. So
I know. We're out in left field playing a different sport now. My bad.
Yep. Different show almost, but that's all right. It's fun to talk about.
Yeah.
okay. Man, so many questions come to
Have
mind.
you heard of Christadelphians?
Mm-mm.
Not really.
Well, they're a very small sect of Christians, but they believe pretty much what I believe in demonology, the study of demons. And if I could share that with you, man, I feel like they could do way more justice than me when it comes to explaining what I believe is actually the first century perspective of demonology and Satan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, quick question, and we can move back to the main topic. I don't want to confuse the audience. Revelation. My only question in this regard: Revelation 20, verse 1-3. Who's Michael chaining up with a great chain?
The dragon. Yeah.
Yeah, but who is, in your perspective, John? Who would that be?
Well, I believe dragons and beasts and whatnot are all in reference to empires and or.
Sorry to interrupt you, but Revelation does define this for us. Like, it tells us directly in Revelation 12:17. It's the dragon, Satan. It tells you who the reference of the dragon is. It's actually Satan character.
Right. And we could say like Babylon is Satan. Like Satan is used and seen as an adversary. So like when you see Balaam walking to do his work, he's riding his donkey. The good angel is called Hasatan. So the word Satan is more of a title for anyone who's an adversary. And I think Yahweh himself says, I will be a Hasatan to you, but I have to Google it and find out where that's at. But he does say, I will be a Satan to you. So it's more of an adversary, whether you're good or bad.
Well, no, we definitely agree that there's words in Hebrew that can be used according to, that one word can be used in a different context, and have, like the word Adam, Adamah, right, can mean the red dirt, but we also know, it's literally the word for Adam, right? We get that.
Yeah. So I agree with you on Revelation 12 that it is Satan because the beast, whether that's an empire or a conscious spiritual being, it is an adversary. So either way, we're right,
Well, no, the beast is not Satan in the book of Revelation. Those are two different things.
Or the dragon. Sorry, I meant to say dragon.
Yeah, so Michael
Says the
comes down
people.
with a chain at the return of Yeshua, and he wraps up the actual dragon, which it says specifically is the old serpent and Satan,
Mhm.
not an empire. He doesn't wrap up a thought process or a bad thought process. Like
Right.
it says, and that literal wrapped up entity is put in a hole in the ground for 1,000 years. Okay, I just thought I'd throw that out there. I never heard that.
Do you believe in the serpent seed doctrine?
No, I've
So,
actually
like,
done
that's
an
what-
entire debate with Zen Garcia on my channel debunking that.
Yeah, because I was thinking, if that snake, that serpent in the garden is that dragon, and in the beginning Genesis that says that through his seed and through her seed there will be contention, and so we would have to start saying, well, who's the descendant of the serpent? Who's the seed of the serpent? It's always man.
Do you believe in the serpent seed doctrine?
No, but I was just going to say that the descendants of the serpent is humans. The enemy of Israel were humans, right?
Well, I think Yeshua
Canaanites and
kind of expounds in John chapter 8, where he's talking about if you were the seed of Abraham, you'd do the deeds of Abraham. Instead, you're the children of the devil because you do the deeds.
There we
of the
go.
devil.
That's a great example. Yeah.
But it doesn't negate the fact that there's an actual devil.
Yeah.
So just like it doesn't negate the fact there was an actual Abraham. So like, but either way, that's okay. Sorry to get distracted. You threw
No,
me
you're
for a
okay.
loop.
I love that topic. I just wasn't prepared for it.
That's all right.
I could have had notes on it. I have a lot of good videos on it if you don't mind checking them out.
Interesting. Yeah, we don't believe that angels were kicked out of heaven after some kind of pre-Adamic war in heaven, as is kind of often implied and taught in a lot of mainstream theologies, even. But we would say that there was a group of angels that were sent to earth to help mankind, and that they rebelled. Yeah.
Okay.
And then it's 2 Peter 2:4 that says God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into Tartarus, committed them into the pits of darkness reserved for judgment. And it's comparing the angels there to mankind. He's like, so what did he say in the next verse? Like, what is he gonna do to us if we sin? So God didn't spare angels. So I would say that the angels there couldn't be just regular messengers. How do you interpret that? You said you thought it would just be a messenger of like man.
Yeah, like angelos, the Greek word angelos is messenger, which we know it could be a human or an angelic being, in that to be cast into the grave until judgment day, could be death. Because we all I believe in soul sleep, not hell, like conscious eternal torment or nothing like that. ECT.
Yeah, we don't believe in ECT, but we do believe there's a distinguishment between the place where the souls of mankind wait a resurrection versus Tartarus. Tartarus is a specific word used by Peter, which has a historical definition in the Hebrew scriptures, which is a place separate from Sheol. It's specifically just for the angels who sinned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or Abaddon in the Hebrew, as we've come to connect it.
Okay. Yeah, I have to go back and look at 2 Peter then.
Yeah, man. Sorry to distract you. I think you were trying to address 1 Timothy 3:16, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
we got a little off.
We did.
But because we started getting into the idea of how is the resurrection defined. And I was just trying to ask about this passage here of, how he appeared in the flesh. So I just thought that's like, my biggest thing is like, why even all these references, of him being sent from heaven, becoming, in the flesh, overshadowed by the Holy Spirit, not just born, like there's a lot of things that have to be reinterpreted, and I know that may sound condescending. I don't mean like that, but like there's a lot of things that has to take on a very special interpretation in my understanding to override what I feel is plainly spoken, which is, he found himself in the appearance of a man because he existed, as multiple texts say, and specifically he existed in the form of Elohim before he found himself in the appearance of man. That's just, I think, my biggest sticking point with this thought process, that he didn't pre-exist. And like I said earlier, I got, John 18:38, he's saying, my kingdom is not of this earth. That's just the way I view, like, he's already understood that he's been named over the angels as the authority over them underneath the Father, just like 1 Corinthians 15:20-28 or 24-28 expound that even though Yeshua was given all this authority in heaven and earth, he was not over the Father is still over him. You know what I mean? So like even in heaven above, before he's sent on this mission, he had a kingdom And that's why, like in Matthew 12, he talks about, at any moment I could have my Father dispatch 12 legions of angels. You know what I'm saying? Like, he has authority, that he had a whole kingdom, but he stepped down from that to take on this role, this mission of being the servant for this purpose. That's how I understand it, at least.
And we're in agreement with that. I guess the only difference is that I saw it as him being born, growing in wisdom, i.e., the Torah, and understanding through maybe his mom teaching him, or angels visiting him, or all the above, with the Holy Spirit fully empowering him. He's seeing all the promises in Torah of him being the Messiah. Who knows? He had maybe a bunch of visions and dreams and understandings of, like, you're the guy, and he had that fullness of the Holy Spirit. And as he grew in wisdom and understood what his rightful place is as king, and he literally can perform miracles and judge and raise the dead and whatnot, he stepped down when he started his ministry and said, first, I must lay down my life for my sheep. When I come back, I will be given what I deserve. Rightfully have. It's just the king being the king. It's just the starting point, really. Your starting point is, I want to say before Genesis, and mine is his birth. We're only 4,000 years off.
Well, brother, I just wanted to appreciate you real quick, John. You could have, since you haven't studied out Enoch to the point where you've accepted that it's Holy Spirit inspired scripture. Maybe, when we've leaned on that at all tonight, you could have just said, why are we even looking at this? But you've been really gracious in letting us talk about what our understandings of that text is. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think it's important that we understand where each of us are coming from. And if I never shut my mouth and listen, I'll never understand what someone's coming from. And if I never take the time to learn where someone's coming from, why should they listen to me?
Yeah. Well said.
Thanks.
Cool. I think I've exhausted my points for the night, or my questions, I should say.
John,
did you said you had some questions for us?
I have one.
Yeah, one more.
I'm sorry. Did you say John or WesBlaze?
John, you said you had questions for us?
I have one more, and then after that, I don't mind praying and wrapping it up.
All right.
But I think I can answer it, because after listening to you guys, I'm like, oh, this is what they'll say. So let's see. Balaam, he's prophesying over Israel because he was paid to curse him, but he couldn't. And when he prophesied over him, he says, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not nay, or whatever the old word is. Pretty much saying, I can see the coming Messiah through my prophetic vision, but he's not here, and he's not among Israel, and he's not in this time or place. And, I would obviously say, well, if he pre-existed, why isn't he mentioned? Like, there he is. He's in heaven. He's concealed, right? Because Enoch had prophecy, and he's like, he's concealed, but I see him because I have the gift of prophecy. But Balaam said, I don't see him until the coming first century, right?
Just to clarify real quick, Enoch's citation, that's the wrong word. Enoch's declaration of seeing the Son of Man was not considered a prophetic speech. It was an actual vision.
Okay.
So this was a moment where he's given a vision where it says, at that moment, my spirit was translated. He's seeing things in heaven above. He's got angels actually showing him a vision. I don't know how this works according to physics, but apparently they can, when they show up, they can they can show you a vision. And this is consistent with what you see all throughout Enoch, because he's interacting with angels everywhere. And this is why he doesn't literally, his physical body doesn't go to heaven, but he's shown a vision of heaven and what's going on, just like Abraham is in Genesis 15 and other, just like
same
Paul,
thing with John, right? John the Revelator.
Yeah, and on the island of Patmos. Absolutely right. He's seeing a vision of things in heaven happening. So to my thing, even if we left Enoch out of the situation and you're referencing Balaam as some sort of litmus test, I would say, well, Daniel had a vision of seeing the Son of Man, but he saw him in future after he's already ruling over the nations.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? But I just think it's interesting that, if I personally, and I haven't really talked about this on my channel, but I'm wondering, because I've done so much research on the Septuagint versus the Masoretic. I don't know what your line of inquiry is on that, or if
like
you've had a lot of experience with that. Yeah. So just if you ever want to research it, it's created about 1,000 years later, and there's a lot of things that we see quoted in the New Testament that you only find in the Septuagint, because that was the actual scrolls they would have had during that day, not the Masoretic. So But when you look at how much has been slightly shaded to hide the Messiah in the Masoretic, whereas the Septuagint just is like super bold. One of the verses we mentioned tonight, Psalm 110, verse 3, it's very interesting to me, to makes me wonder if these passages I read in Isaiah where it says, and the, what does it say? It say Yahweh spoke, and the Holy One of Israel says to me, to relay to the people, right? And it makes me wonder, is that just a Hebraic way of speaking where they add on to multiple titles when introducing who's speaking, or is it the Almighty and the Holy One of Israel, the set apart one of Israel? That would be Yeshua. Is he speaking also? And they're both in agreement with this message, just like we see in John's vision in Revelation. The Almighty and the Lamb are in agreement with the message. That's why Jesus is called the testimony of Jesus, in agreement with what's being spoken from God to Jesus, to an angel, to John on the island of Patmos. So that's why Jesus is the testimony, because he's testifying that this message is valid and true, and he's relaying it to his angel, who then goes and gives it to John. So, and that'd be another verse I'd love to ask you about, since you don't believe in angels, but we can shelf that for another, maybe another night. We can have you on and you can talk about how you
said fallen angels.
I hope you guys bring me back on, because I enjoyed this. I hope you do invite me again. There's several things I want to talk about atonement theory with you, because I'm like, there's so many verses I want to ask you about. How is Yeshua?
We were trying to get together a substitutionary atonement roundtable discussion, kind of like we're having tonight. Except tonight was a little different. You know, we intentionally had you and Matthew Jensen on, who believe one way. But I think we all agree on the substitutionary atonement concept, and we just would like to flesh it out, because Trinitarian thought process abuses that concept so badly.
Yeah, created being can't be my savior.
Yeah. So like, I'm trying to get that together, but we're gonna have Ken Heidebrecht on from Making Those Words. He just went through a hurricane, was without power for like 5 days. Marlo's in the chat, but he responded to my email 5 days too late, so I couldn't organize either. Marlo, check your emails every day, brother. So I was trying to get together a bunch of us brothers, but it's just really hard with everyone's schedules. So we'll keep trying, and we'll keep trying to organize that, because I would love to talk about substitutionary atonement, how it's misrepresented, how it's actually talked about in the scriptures, and see what everybody thinks, because I've done a whole video on it, but I feel like there's a point where my videos grow to like 4,000 views, and then YouTube stops recommending it forever. They just like hide it away in a hidey hole, and it never grows again, and you're like, wait a minute. So even if you were just recommending it at a tenth of the pace that you were in the first 2 weeks, people should still be viewing it. Why is no one viewing it anymore? It's like they just hide it forever.
I don't want to sound bitter, but I am so sure I'm shadow banned, because there's no reason why I get the 300, 400 views like in 2 days, and then it just hits a wall. Yeah. And I'm like, where's this wall coming from? Somebody's got to stumble upon it and say, I want to know this topic. It's so weird. And I think it's
Marlo, I'm just giving you a hard time in the live chat, bro. But yeah, I need to get a more reliable way to communicate with Marlo, because he's not on Facebook anymore.
YouTube just also today, for videos that were posted a year or more ago, YouTube hit me with 2 copyright strikes, not just claims, on my main channel, and like at once. So all they have to do is come up with a third, and WesBlazeMuziK is gone, bro. So it's crazy. And I just wish that there was a way that they would tell you, hey, there is a copyright on this video when you upload it, so that you then have the choice to go through. They don't do this to you, and sometimes they wait a year or more before they tell you, oh, there's a strike on it. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I honestly think what that is, for some of that, is that they take their crawling, whatever they're called, and they crawl all of YouTube, to find certain sounds and things.
Spider box.
And they'll crawl YouTube and find a formerly or a copyright music. They'll find that, and then they'll go to that person who made it and buy it from them. So then they'll copyright it. So then they can retroactively then go and claim it on all those videos that's been used on.
And they might do this towards channels that they specifically disagree with or don't feel like are fitting for their advertisers, or whatever the case. I would believe it. Wow. Very,
very easy to do. Very easy. Because it's like, that's how you shut people down and give them strikes for no reason. And I mean, it's so easy, man. It's so unfair, the way they've got this thing set up. So, yeah.
You guys mind if I pray before we wrap it up?
Please
Yeah, you can pray, brother. Let's all hold hands. And,
Yeah.
No.
knuckle up.
Thank you, Father, for these brothers in the faith, and thank you so much for Matthew Jensen, Wes Blaze, and Sean. They've given me the privilege to be able to join them at a roundtable discussion and discuss this topic. And I pray that we were just a good example of what it means to be brotherly loved, to give each other brotherly love, peace, patience, and kindness, and that we all are just humble enough to receive any sort of knowledge from what is Enoch, and if Enoch is scripture and certain verses, and we can all just come to you and at your presence and say, Father, show me, how should I read this? How should I interpret it? How should I understand if Yeshua pre-existed or not? Because we all are just learning, and we all just want to know what the truth is, and we know that the Holy Spirit reveals it to those who are seeking earnestly. So we ask for wisdom, knowledge, and I just thank you again for giving me the chance to speak to these brothers, and I hope everybody in the viewership enjoyed it. And we pray this in Yeshua's name, our Messiah. Hallelujah. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen, brother. Thank you guys for coming on tonight. Thank you everyone in the live chat for being here. Sorry, this was not a night that we intended for a bunch of questions, but as always, I do lots of videos where we do Q&As. So hold your questions for next time. We appreciate it. Anything you guys want to talk about before we go as far as things going on with your channel?
Oh, well, I've been trying to do a little bit of anti-missionary stuff, but then also I just like getting back into Christology. That's my number one thing. So I actually think I might do a John 17:5 video, but that's kind of what I've been focusing on. If anybody's interested, jump on my channel and see what you think.
And just for the audience, you said anti-missionary stuff. You mean you're countering anti-missionaries?
My bad. Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I'm not president, dude. They'd be taking little snippets of what I said and putting it on CNN. Yeah, countering as you see, Courtney Smith, she's pretty well known with the countering anti-missionaries. And yeah.
Cool.
All right. You guys go subscribe to John Lawson, check him out. And then as always, WesBlaze and I are doing Uncommon Ground. I think we're scheduled next week to come back, right? On Uncommon Ground.
Let's do it. Yeah, you said you're not available Wednesday though.
No.
Okay, I'll get with you on the day, but maybe one day later in the week.
But we got Sukkot coming up, and so we're both going to be. I'm going to be traveling, but the others, yeah, we'll do our best. But ultimately, if you haven't already gone over to WesBlazeMuziK and checked out Uncommon Ground, be sure to do that. It's one of the listed video or channels. Even under Kingdom of Context as well. So go subscribe to WesBlazeMuziK as well.
Please and thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All praises
Bless
to
you
the
guys
Father.
so much. Thank you. Yeah.
Much
Thanks.
love.
Look forward to seeing you guys again. We'll see you next time.
Enjoyed it. Later.
Everyone in the live chat, we appreciate you guys, and we will see you guys. Good things are coming. More study guide books are on the way. Finishing up a few right now, and then we've got Wisdom Guard, as we've announced on socials and on our community tab here on YouTube, is a scripture trivia game we got being worked on, as well as the Kingdom of Context app is on the way. It's under the approval process for both Android on the Play Store as well as Apple. And so, Lord willing, just a few more days and that'll be available for people to download. And then you can ensure that you never miss a notification when we upload a new video, or we go live, or we drop a new article, or we make an announcement that you want to hear. So be looking for that, everybody. We appreciate everyone. We hope to see you next time.